Great. Okay. Good morning. Thank you for attending the 2020 Sunstone Digital Symposium, Session 126, titled Thriving Through a Faith Transition. The audio from this session will be available for purchase at sunstone.org after the symposium. The video recording of this session will be available in the Whova app for approximately 3 months, beginning at the end of August of 2020. Please type your questions into the Whova app to be addressed during the question and answers. At Sunstone, we are making it a goal to build a community that allows many ways for people to express their faith. Our tagline is, "There's more than one way to Mormon." We invite you to help us build a community where all paths are given space to be better understood. Please support us in our mission by making a donation and subscribing at sunstone.org. What kind of experiences lead people to transition out of the church? How do these transitions evolve? How possible is it to maintain a relationship within the church or with still active friends and family? 3 panelists will draw on their own experiences and research as they explore these questions. I'll take a second to introduce you to our speakers before we begin. Jenny Morrow grew up in an active LDS church in Salt Lake City. She has since transitioned and no longer affiliates with any religious denomination. She is married and is a family therapist, marriage and family therapist, and relationship coach. Host of a former podcast, Ask an Ex-Mormon Therapist, Jenny now co-hosts the Advanced Relationship podcast with her husband, Bryce. Jenny loves walking, yoga, and deepening her relationships. Laura Moss was born into the LDS Church and was an active member, believing member her entire life. At age 51, she was given the choice between the LDS Church and her child. Ultimately, Laura chose her LGBTQ child. After deciding that the LDS Church leadership is wrong about how they treat LGBTQ people, she studied church history and subsequently left the LDS Church. Mark Hallstrom was proud to have been raised in upstate New York, the cradle of the Restoration. He is the son of a traditional Mormon family that always stayed dressed in their Sunday best after church. As a teenager, Mark happily brought the missionaries to his friends' homes to be taught the gospel. Both of Mark's parents and all of his 7 siblings have attended BYU, and all but the youngest have married in the temple. He has recently returned to college as an older, non-traditional student, determined to flourish in the new life he has built after Mormonism. I will now give the floor to our presenters.
All right. Hi, I'm very excited to be here, and thanks for introducing us, Anne. My name is Jenny Morrow, and I'm going to actually share my presentation via slides. So I'm hoping, let's see if I can make sure you can see the slideshow here. Okay. Okay, so yeah, my name is Jenny Morrow. Oh, okay, here we go. So I am really, really excited to be talking a little bit about my own faith transition, but mostly what I wanted to share with those of you here today is a model or a blueprint of how you can look at navigating your own faith transition, or if you're supporting someone who's going through a faith transition, here's one way to look at it. And this really comes after navigating my own process, as well as sitting with hundreds of clients who are going through their own individual process, and also couples going through mixed faith marriage processes. So just a little bit about me. About 14 years ago, I decided to go back to graduate school and study marriage and family therapy. And this was really the catalyst to my own faith transition. Really seeing people who were coming into my office who were stuck in shame around all sorts of things. And through that process, really realizing my own shame and how that was impacting my own intimate relationship struggles. So and at this point, I've sat in about 12,000 sessions with my private clients. So again, I've sat and watched so many people navigate how do I really show up in my life in a way that's more authentic? Because what I really realized was, I transitioned out of the Mormon church about 10 years ago when I was around 30, 31 years of age. And I was unmarried. I had never married yet, and just really realized how my own shame was a big block in me being able to show up authentically the way I wanted to in order to create the kind of relationship and marriage I wanted to have. And I also live near an Air Force base, so we may have jets flying by. It sounds like I can hear them coming, but I'm just going to move right through it and just give you guys hopefully some info that really feels helpful. So I'm now the founder of the Advanced Relationship Academy. I host the Advanced Relationship podcast with my husband, Bryce, and I coach individuals and couples, including around faith transition and mixed faith marriage, things like that. So if you want free info, go to the Advanced Relationship podcast, and we usually put out a podcast every week. Okay, so this was one of the great rewards of my own faith transition, was being able to be open to meeting and marrying a guy like my husband, Bryce, who was secular, has never been a part of religion. And just really, really grateful that my own faith transition led me into that relationship. So about 14 years ago, when I began working with clients, one of the things I was looking at is, what is it that people are really looking for? Underneath all the trauma, addictions, relationship struggles, people are coming in for all sorts of things. And I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, and I'm wondering, how do I help all these people? So I began to dive deeper into understanding, what is it they really want? Underneath all the struggles, what is the desire that people have? And what I found as I kind of dug under and asked deeper and deeper questions, what I found is that underneath all the struggles, it seemed like ultimately what my clients were wanting was a sense of intimacy and connection with themselves and who they really wanted to be in the world, and a sense of intimacy and connection with others, including with their life, with their careers, with their relationship to their religion. It seemed like ultimately what people wanted was this experience of intimacy and connection. Then a few years after I began putting this blueprint together, I came across a man named Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell studied mythology, cultures, and religions for about 50 years. And near the end of his life, he was interviewed. And the interviewer said, you spent half a century studying humanity. What is it we all really want? And then the interviewer guessed, and he said, is it meaning? Is that what we all want? And Joseph Campbell said, people say that what we're all seeking is meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think that what we're seeking is an experience of aliveness. So we actually feel the rapture of being alive. And I think this is really what we're talking about when we're talking about thriving. He went on to describe this. He said, so that our life experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonances with our own innermost being. So that who we are on the inside gets to be lived out, manifest, and expressed on the outside in our life experiences. And I really, really connected with this. And I ended up adding this word aliveness to the chart, because it really seems like this is the benefit of intimacy and connection. When we're connected to ourselves, when we're connected to others as who we truly are, that's when we experience this experience of aliveness. So I found after years of doing this work that there's two ways that we go about seeking this experience of intimacy and connection and this aliveness. The first and most natural way is we show up as the authentic self. And we really see this with babies. They just are who they are. What starts to happen throughout our life, even when we're very young, before even verbal, is we start to pick up cues, very subtle cues from our parents, our caregivers, our pets, our peers, our siblings, our teachers, that certain aspects of us are not as acceptable as others. And what starts to happen is that when any part of us is betrayed or rejected, whether that's real betrayal or rejection or whether it's perceived, what happens for most of us is we begin to move over to the other side of this chart here and we begin to mask. Now, there's two sides of masking. It's like two sides of a coin. On one side of masking is the passive response. And the passive response is where we pretend, we ignore, we deny, we stuff, we hide, we bury, we sweep things under the rug. The other side of masking is the aggressive side, and that's where we try to fix something, we try to control it, we try to make it better, we try to coerce or manipulate or blame or in some way push change. So you may even see religion itself will sometimes act out of this masked state, or leaders in religion can act out of this masked state. We're all susceptible to being in the masked state. And what I tell clients is there's nothing wrong with masking. It doesn't make us bad or wrong. It's a survival strategy. And it's our best attempt to experience intimacy and connection and aliveness when actually some part of us has been betrayed or rejected and we're too afraid to actually be who we really are in that moment. So the problem with masking is it disconnects us. Even though it's not immoral, I don't believe from myself, I believe it disconnects us from who we really are and what we really want to experience in terms of being able to show up moment to moment as the authentic self. Now, when this happens, we begin to engage in coping strategies in an attempt to deal with the disconnect. So the disconnect's already happened and we've disconnected from ourselves or others in some way. And now we engage in coping strategies in an attempt to deal with that. And there's a whole variety of coping strategies. These are just some. Anything that's out of balance, anything that doesn't support the thriving and the health that would be very aligned with the authentic self. We can start to move into these coping strategies. So overachieving, underachieving, perfectionism, withdrawal or neediness, dramatization of things, over emotional, under emotional, over logical, under logical, anything that's out of balance, that's not really aligned with reality as it is in the moment. So again, I would say coping strategies from my perspective are not immoral or bad, but the problem is, again, they're ineffective for creating more of what you really want. They just keep you over on this side of the chart in this struggle and keeps you from that connection and aliveness you want. And at worst, they can lead to depression, anxiety, addictions, and physical and mental illness. So you can see here kind of this whole side of the chart when I began putting it together. And I call this the traditional relationship side, which is, again, not a bad thing, but it's a more survival oriented approach to our relationship to life, to ourselves, to others. And at the base of it, we can end up feeling isolated and alone, disconnected from this very thing we want most, this aliveness that comes in the moments where we would say we're thriving, right? Okay, so traditional relationship qualities, we're not going to go through those right now. We may have time at the end. Okay, but I want to talk about the other side of this blueprint. So the other way, again, there are two ways we show up and attempt to experience this aliveness. So again, the first way is the authentic self. And I just described the masking, but let's come back to the authentic self. So if we're able to show up as who we really are moment to moment, and it's safe, what happens is over time, more and more of us is able to come forward and unfold and develop. And I had a mentor years ago. She said, Jenny, you're as deep and wide as an ocean. Even if you have your whole life, you'll never know all of you. And this really connects to this experience of the authentic self. Like, it's not like you're authentic today and then that's all of you. You know, more and more of you is going to be available over the days, over the years. And if you're able to use a process that helps you show up as who you really are, if you're able to navigate these moments when you may feel betrayed or rejected in a healthy way and with support, and be able to come back over to the authentic self, find a sense of safety, that's when you get to experience this vulnerability. And I really do believe it's this vulnerability that powers up this experience of intimacy and connection and aliveness. And the way I describe vulnerability is that it's the experience of evolution that follows the breaking down of something that was previously a limiter. Could have been an old story from our own mind, from culture, an archetype inside of us. And this new state that really is more of who we are can be perceived or experienced as weak, unstable, defenseless, susceptible, and fragile. So it's a really intense, it can be a very intense place to be. And so, but if we're able to be there and it's safe, you're able to begin to show up and be more creative, more innovative, and more of who you really are. These are the moments where my clients say, I feel like I just plugged back in, or I just clicked back in, or it's the moments where you feel like you're in the flow. These are the experiences that I would say we would normally define as I am thriving. So the question is, what if it's not safe for me to show up as the authentic self? And this is the question I get over and over and over from clients in a variety of different ways. They ask this, but what if it's not safe for me to show up as the authentic self? What if I don't have the capacity within me to show up as who I am? What if my relationship doesn't have the capacity within it? Whether that's my relationship to my partner, my children, my relationship to my religion. What if my relationship to someone else cannot handle me showing up as who I am? What do I do? So this became an essential piece to this blueprint, and that is boundaries. Boundaries are the gatekeeper of the authentic self. The way I describe boundaries is that boundaries are for you, about you. So anytime you say, so-and-so is crossing my boundary, I like to remind my clients, well, that means it's not a boundary. Boundaries are not for others. They're not about what others are doing, okay? And we don't have time to dive in and talk about boundaries, but those are preferences, those are requests. You can say to someone, I'd like you to not do this or that, but that's not a boundary. Boundaries are for you, about you, and there's ways to navigate that. And so boundaries are a conscious choice to create a container of safety in which you can choose to show up as the authentic self. Again, we don't have time to talk, maybe through the questions. If you have any questions about boundaries, I can dive in deeper. So, but this is how it fits into the whole chart. So if you now look at the other side, the authentic self, you can see how it all taps in together, and you have the safety, the vulnerability, but those boundaries are an essential part, they're gatekeeper to that. And that's the side of the chart that I call the advanced relationship. And that's when you're able to either get back over to the authentic self, or you have some kind of a mastery process or practice. And I think of it so much like yoga or martial arts. It's a mastery practice, just like with your body. You can have practices that help you master being able to use boundaries with your body. Rather than being so aggressive or so passive, you find that balance and you're able to navigate it and create new postures, new moves. It's very much like this in advanced relationship work. So it doesn't look like we've got time to go through these, but feel free to, I'll give you some info for how you can find me, and I've got free webinars that go through all of this in more detail. So, you know, whether you stay in religion or leave religion, the key is to learn how to thrive. And a lot of people think the problem is, the problem is Mormonism, that I grew up Mormon. But what I've really found is that the key is to learn how to relate to yourself, life, and others in a more authentic way. And that's going to help the faith transition just be a little bit more organic and natural. You won't have to feel like you have to force things so much or be passive to them. And really, I think deep down, this is what we're all seeking, is an experience of being able to be connected and feel alive in our relationship with ourselves, with nature, with the world, with our careers, and with those we love. And with your relationship to religion. So whether you stay or leave, if you've been Mormon, you're always going to have some relationship to Mormonism. And being able to navigate that relationship through an advanced relationship mindset is going to help you feel like you can thrive. So, welcome to this process for those who are new to it, or if you've been in it for years. It is a journey, and it can, just like any yoga practice, it can take your whole life. You just continue to be in the practice and to continue to learn how to thrive and continue to advance over and over. And the process doesn't necessarily go fast. It can be something where you move and then you plateau and then you move again, but just know that it's a process, and that that there's support. So I myself had a coach for about quite a few years of my own process. I still have coaches that I work with. My husband and I have a couples coach we work with at times. So if you're interested in diving deeper and getting free info on how to navigate your relationship to yourself and others, check out the Advanced Relationship Podcast. We have a free private Facebook group where we share tons of info at the Advanced Relationship Podcast community. You can go to my website, jennymorrow.com, or advancedrelationshipacademy.com. Lots of info and just sending so much care to all of those who are in this process. Thank you for letting me be here today, and that's it.
Okay, am I on? I think I'm on. Hi, my name is Laura, and I think, Jenny, you need to turn off your video, maybe?
Oh, okay, sorry, I thought I had gotten kicked off the meeting. I'm glad I'm still here.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Jenny, for that wonderful presentation. Very professional, and I learned a lot. I hope you all did too. I think Mark and I are going to be just sharing personal stories a little bit more. And I'm fairly new to my faith transition. Started about a year ago. I officially made the decision to leave the church last fall, like around October 2019. Let's see. So my hope today is that something I share may be helpful to someone going through a faith transition. Maybe bring you a little hope, maybe give you a few ideas, things that have helped me just kind of move forward. Faith transitions, as most people who've been through them know, can be very jarring and difficult. And so I have a few steps in no particular order that I found really helped me moving forward and kind of rising out of the negativity that prevails or can prevail when you're going through a faith transition. Just a little background information about me, just to give you a little of my history. So I was born and raised in the LDS faith. I left last year at the age of 51. So it was very much a part of my life. I raised my 4 children in the church, and my oldest 2 children, I have 2 girls and 2 boys. My oldest 2 children, girl and then boy, served missions. My husband and I were still in the temple. We've been married 30 years, and he has chosen to stay active in the church at this time. And 3 out of my 4 children have left the church, and my second oldest, my son, is still active, and he and his wife were still in the temple about 3 years ago, and they have a 2-year-old daughter and a new baby girl. So my husband and I are enjoying being grandparents. So my faith transition basically started about almost a year ago. And what happened was my oldest child came out to me a few years prior to that as LGBTQ, and I did not handle it well. Our relationship was okay, but not great, and it continued to deteriorate, and to a point where last year she via text told me that she needed space, and that she would let me know when she was ready to talk. And a month went by, and I was inconsolable. I went into a depression. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I had a good guess that it had to do with my attitudes towards LGBTQ. There were other issues with extended family, and I finally reached out to her and we talked, and she told me on the phone that I was toxic to her, and that that she couldn't have me in her life if I couldn't love her for who she truly was. And it was very hard to hear those words, but I knew that she was right, that the way that I was raised in the church had taught me to other LGBTQ people that they were less than. And I told her that I was very sorry that I had hurt her, and that I wanted to change, and that I was going to do whatever that took. And we ended the phone call, and we didn't talk for a while, but I really worked on that. Opened myself up to the LGBTQ community, tried to just see them differently, and ultimately decided that the God that I knew and loved would not treat the LGBTQ community the way that the church and the leaders of the church were doing. And they, I just really started to see what they were saying in a different way, and ultimately decided that I did not agree with the church leadership on how they treated the LGBTQ community, including my own child. And I made the decision to choose my child over the church, and I started asking myself, if I feel that the church leadership is wrong about this particular issue, then what else might they be wrong about? And so I started to dive into other issues and church history, and everything unraveled from there. I ultimately made the choice to walk away from a belief system that no longer worked for myself and my family, and I never looked back. And I'm grateful that my beautiful and compassionate daughter chose to forgive me and give me a second chance. And we are slowly repairing our relationship, and I have honestly never been happier with the decision that I made to leave the church. So that was the beginning of my faith transition. And as I unpacked LGBTQ issues, truth claims, historicity, I felt the world drop from underneath me. I felt like I was in a free fall. I wondered if I would ever recover. And the next few months were a roller coaster ride of emotions, including feelings of hurt, fear, grief, shock, anxiety, anger, sadness, betrayal, ongoing. And anybody who's been through a faith transition understands what that feels like. You wonder if you're ever going to feel normal again. These feelings are valid, a normal part of transitioning out of a belief system that you have been fully immersed in for most of, if not your whole life. And you have every right to feel all of those feelings and more for as long a time as you need. So my goal today is to focus on the moving forward from that. Once you've gone through all of those heavy emotions and you're ready to move forward, I have a few steps that helped me over the last few months. And hopefully, instead of letting a faith transition break you, hopefully you'll be empowered to rise above the hurt and pain, move forward, and be stronger than ever before. So the first step that helped me was to find someone who can be your anchor during this difficult time in your life, someone who will embrace you, welcome you with open arms, and love you for who you are and who you are becoming. When I first left the church, I reached out to my brother, Dave. I'm the oldest of 7 kids and the only girl. And so I have 6 brothers, and of all the 7 of us, he was the only one who had left the church. And he'd been on his own outside the church for about 25 years before I left. Not only did I know he would support my faith transition, but I knew he was the only person in my family that would truly understand it. So ask yourself, do you have a parent, sibling, cousin, friend, somebody you've lost touch with before because they had left the church. It may feel awkward at first to reach out to them because maybe there was a falling out, but you may be surprised at how happy they are to hear from you. Step 2, don't try to throw away who you were before your faith transition. Everything you have been through has brought you to this moment in time, even your time as a member of the LDS Church. When I was having my conversation with my brother Dave, I was grappling with making sense of the beliefs I'd held on to for so many years, letting go of them, figuring out what my new beliefs would be. And I kept saying the words old life, new life. And finally, Dave just kind of interrupted me and said, and this was so poignant and wise, and it's really stuck with me. He said, there's no old life or new life. It's just your life. So just remember that you are who you are because of everything you've experienced and every decision you've made, and even decisions that were made for you without your consent. Wishing away the past or staying in a place of anger for too long can just be a waste of time and energy. And if you're stuck, reach out for help. There's help in so many places, friends, social media, coaches, mentors, mental health professionals. Jenny is a perfect person to reach out to for help. Step 3, find your tribe. Reaching out for support after a faith transition can be difficult, but it is so important, especially after losing the community of church members that we're so used to relying on. One of the first things I did after leaving the church was look for a new community. I found it with former ward members who had already left the church, friends and family members who'd gone through their own faith transitions prior to mine. I found local support groups, Facebook support groups. I attended retreats and post-Mormon conferences, much like what we're doing online right now. Upon leaving the church, many of us feel alone and rejected. Social media is a great way to search out and reconnect with those who we may have lost contact with in the past after they left the church. And they can be one of your best resources. Step 4, give yourself permission to not have all the answers right away. People will probably ask you what you believe now that you no longer believe that the LDS Church is true. It's perfectly okay to say, I don't know. One of the best pieces of advice I was given at the beginning of my faith transition was to not wait until I had all the answers before letting people know that I was leaving the church. Often members of the church have a hard time grappling with the idea of not believing in anything. And I was asked on multiple occasions what I believe now that I didn't believe the church was true, or what kind of religion I would belong to. And it was very empowering to just say, I don't know. I don't know yet. I'm figuring it out. And give yourself time to do that. Give yourself time to figure out your new beliefs. Read books, watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts, talk to people. Most of all, give yourself permission to make up your own mind. It can be scary at first to be able to think for yourself after leaving a high-demand religion where you were always told what to think and believe, but soon you will find it very refreshing and freeing. Step 5, give yourself permission to just be. When I went down the rabbit hole of investigating church history, at first it was exhilarating, and then it became exhausting. And I made a decision to step away for a while from anything having to do with the church. Thankfully, my husband was understanding when I told him that I could no longer attend church or the temple, as I found them to be triggering and unhealthy for me mentally and emotionally. I also decided when I was ready to stop wearing garments and when I was ready to start trying things like coffee and alcohol. But you have to decide for yourself when you're ready to do or not do things. Don't feel pressured from anybody. Don't feel the need to do anything you used to do or do anything you've never been allowed to do before. Unless you feel ready to, then go for it. That's my advice. But take time with yourself. Take time for yourself. You are changing and growing. You are evolving. Enjoy it. Don't rush the process, although you may feel in a hurry to do so. I know I did when I left the church because I'd been in the church for such a long time. But take time with learning about things in and out of the church. There's so much information, it can be overwhelming. Take time, step away from it for a while, and just enjoy your newfound freedom. And last, step 6, go as quick or as slow as you need to with coming out to friends and family about leaving the church. For me, I couldn't live authentically and keep it a secret. I had to tell people pretty quickly. But you have to decide, what's best for you. And you may have family members that will take it very hard, and you have to protect yourself and your relationships. Skipping a little bit here. Yeah, don't compare your journey to those of others. No two faith transitions are the same. Yours is yours alone, and only you know how you need to proceed. So just, go easy on yourself, be kind to yourself, and just give yourself permission to do your faith transition however you need to. I hope that this was helpful, and that some of these steps might help someone with their faith transition as they're moving forward and exploring a whole new life ahead of them. And good luck to all of those of you who are working through these difficult things, and I wish you all well. And it's Mark's turn.
All right. So my experience of transitioning out of the church actually was a pretty solitary experience. When I did finally mentally kind of leave the church and then stop attending, I was actually a student at BYU. And since my life was still, or my adult life at least, was still evolving, that put me in kind of a bad position of school insecurity and job insecurity, and just with a lot of uncertainty. So really, to start off, to understand my background and my experience with the church, you really kind of have to understand the family dynamic that I grew up in. My dad was very dedicated, and still is very dedicated, to the Mormon church, and my family is seen as one of like pillars in their region of Mormonism. I grew up in upstate New York, and my dad would be gone either for work or for church callings throughout my entire childhood, just many nights away from home attending meetings or high council meetings and just all sorts of different things. And I think because of this, and also from coming from a large family, I really felt like to gain the approval and acceptance of my family, it really is in my best interest to be a really good Mormon and to volunteer to do all these extra things and really dive deep into it. It's kind of like to stand apart. To stand apart, I chose the path of trying to be the most Mormon, or try to really dedicate myself the most in order to be noticed and accepted. This, by the time I was a teenager, I would be reading all sorts of different like apologist books and things about the Mormon church. I would study a lot about gospel principles and gospel doctrine that perhaps the church didn't teach when in the 90s and in the 2000s when I was growing up, but the church used to teach in the 70s or the 60s. And I would actually pretty often bring up these points to my dad, like, hey, what happened to this teaching? Where did it go? And he was pretty open to having those discussions with me about, oh, well, here's where you can read more about this or that, or here's my copy of Mormon Doctrine, or here are these articles you can read. And just from an early age, I kind of was building up this really apologist mindset of, okay, I know real things about church, or church things that are now hidden, but they still make sense because of X, Y, or Z. That's really was my position in church for a very long time. So as as being a youth in the church that really felt dedicated, they also really at the same time was pushing missionary work. So I would actually go through my cell phone contacts of my high school friends that were in there, and when I'm hanging around the missionaries, be like, all right, let's contact some people here. We can go and go over to my friends' houses and we'll teach them some lessons and we'll see how it goes. And I was just, even though it was really kind of awkward, I believed in the faith so strongly. I was like, yeah, we definitely need to share this. And I would try to get excited about that. It's like, if you don't have a choice, if you're being asked to do missionary work or you're being asked to do home teaching or whatever it is, you might as well enjoy it, because in my mind, it wasn't really, the church wasn't really asking, it was a commandment. Like, I will be punished, or it'll count against me if I don't do these things. So I might as well try to have a great attitude about it and just go and do those things. Eventually, it became time for me to go to college, and applying was interesting. It was like, oh, you can apply anywhere as long as you end up going to BYU, was kind of my whole family's thing, or how it felt to me. My parents met at BYU. All of my 6 older siblings had gone. I was expected to probably go, as well as my youngest brother as well. And luckily, I got in. There's a lot of stress of like, oh no, if I don't get in, what will my family think? So I did matriculate. I did get in, and a year before my mission, I attended there, and it was a huge culture shock for me. I was used to having Mormonism be a defining part of my identity growing up in an area where the church isn't prevalent. And because I was kind of the Mormon kid when I was growing up, I got to really kind of define what that meant to my peers. And so I was able to show, I go, oh, we believe in these things, or here's why I act this way, or why I follow the word of wisdom, or whatever. But now suddenly being at BYU, that ownership of my Mormonism kind of felt taken away. That part of my identity is now it's a really group thing, and there's this group pressure that decides what is and isn't okay, and what it means to be a Mormon. And that really bothered me, as well as just the different beliefs and the different ways people really validated Mormonism in their own minds, whether they believed in the young earth theory, or maybe that dinosaurs were placed here by God to trick us, the dinosaur bones, and these sort of ideas. And to me, it just really surprised me. I thought that people, Mormons and people of other faiths, they really had a strong foundation in science, but just also happened to believe parts of the Bible, or for Mormons, parts of the Book of Mormon, to have some historical ideas and facts in there as well. And I was just shocked to see that there's just a wide spectrum of differing beliefs in scientific evidence and in how the world really works. I was studying science before I left for my mission, and so that was especially concerning to me. In my biology class, I remember my professor kind of sighing at the beginning of one of the classes, and him telling us to come up to the front and pick up the stick packet. And this was actually something that is called the BYU evolution packet. And so this professor, who actually his field of study is evolution, he was required by BYU, the university, to pass out this evolution packet that actually goes through the statements of prophets and first presidency statements over time of anything they had said really about evolution. And he went through this, spent the whole class period on it, and he read with us about how, yeah, at first the apostles and the first presidency were resistant to the idea that evolution was a thing, but now you see they're more open to it. And the current statement by them is that through the Spirit of God, they've been told, hey, we don't get all of our answers now. I'll tell you all about how I created the earth and about all those facts when I come back after the second coming during the millennium. Ask me then, and you'll get your answers. So that is their statement now, is that it is really, you believe what you want, and it's really just up in the air. No one knows. Jesus will explain it to us later. That was kind of a problem for me, to see how the church is trying to contradict things that seem pretty obvious. It has a lot of evidence for it. At the same time, though, I was preparing to go and serve a mission, and there's a lot of expectation to do those things. And so I just kind of packed that away in the back of my mind. And even applying and going to a mission, it felt like a very different experience than being the great, good Mormon kid back in my hometown. Now at BYU, I'm being interviewed by someone from a stake presidency who doesn't know me. They don't know my family. He really knows nothing about me. And I just remember feeling really uncomfortable where mission interviews are one of those things where they really dig into your past and they say, well, you play like a never have I ever game, like, have you ever done, and they go through like, everything related to the word of wisdom, the law of chastity. Um, Really, those are the two big ones. And then they say, oh, well, do you believe and all these things? But when I would answer in the negative, like, no, like I haven't broken the law of chastity, I haven't broken the word of wisdom, I remember the state presidency member just getting kind of visibly upset and him just thinking that I was probably just lying to him because everyone has broken the law of chastity and broken the word of wisdom, especially when they're teenagers and things. And he got pissed. He was pretty upset and he would just go in and be like, oh, well, have you ever kissed a girl or have you ever drank tea, or and just really diving into the nitty gritty. And I would stonewall him and be like, no, I haven't, or whatever. And I remember him being like, okay, if that's what you say, and he fills out the form and signs it. But I imagine him, I have no proof, but him writing a note like, oh, I don't believe this guy, or whatever else. And that was kind of on my mind. Um, Eventually, though, I go and I serve, and that's what really opened up my mind to kind of problems in the church. Instead of it being really the atmosphere of the mission or the things I was teaching, it was just the fact that I got to go into the homes of all these different people and see their family dynamics and see how they treat each other and see what they value and how they love each other. And then I was also able to evaluate with my own home life and my own beliefs, what are some things that actually hold me back and that um, kind of weigh me down in my life. Um, I think that perhaps like going out and having young adults meet hundreds and hundreds of people, that sometimes can actually lead them away from the church instead of towards them, like I think the missions are kind of designed to do. And that was definitely the case for me. Once I came back home and then I went back to BYU, there was a class I took. Sounds pretty funny, I think. It was the history and philosophy of math. And the reason I'm bringing this up is during this course, they actually taught us to read ancient Egyptian characters in a couple of different time periods as far as numbers were concerned. And we actually learned how to do simple math problems in like the writing of ancient Egyptian. And that was fun and all good. But I remember about a week or so after that lesson, I kind of just realized in shock, like, oh, wait, what about facsimile 2? So I went and opened up Pearl of Great Price and I flipped to facsimile 2. And I remembered that there are certain sections that says, oh, this is a number, or this is a date, or this is whatever. And if man could figure it out, so let it be. Or this is a number and you can only know it in the temple. And so it's just like, well, I know Egyptian numbers now. Let's figure this out. And so I open it up and I'm all excited and I look at these symbols and I was pretty crestfallen. Those symbols were not numbers at all. They weren't numbers of Egypt. No matter what time period of writing you look at, these definitely weren't Egyptian numbers. And that was a big problem. I remembered when I was like 11, 12 years old, I'd kind of studied the apologist point of view of like, okay, the facsimiles and these scrolls, they aren't ancient Egyptian, but they could still be helpful in translation for different reasons. But seeing this from my own eyes after learning independently at the university, oh, this doesn't match at all, it really kind of broke part of my mind. I was just like, what is going on? And then with this sort of weight being put on my hypothetical shelf here, I was also at the same time teaching Sunday school every week at church, and I was also teaching elders quorum lessons every week. It was a summer semester, so they really didn't have a lot of people in the ward, and I was just teaching 2 hours every week and using the lesson manuals as a guide. And I would be really frustrated and think that, oh, these lesson manuals, they're so much more watered down than the versions 2 or 3 editions ago that really go into the deeper doctrines or the things that Mormons sometimes seem to be embarrassed that they believe in today, about, ruling different worlds or Kolob or whatever it is, or just even church history stories seem to be watered down inside of there. And it was a problem. And so I started to feel really uncomfortable teaching things that I felt were really watered down at church. And I felt like I was really trying to spin the doctrines and the lesson plans of the church in order to make it applicable to the members of my class and to make it so they actually, the class is worth attending, that they're getting something out of church. It just felt like it was a real struggle, like getting blood out of a stone. Like, how do I make this stupid lesson apply to other college students or apply to people that are struggling in their lives? And it sucked. Eventually, what really made me truly decide that I no longer believe at all is I really just thought one day and thought about it. And it's like, I don't personally know anyone that can really tell me with a straight face that they've talked to angels in person that didn't have some sort of medical explanation. I had had mission friends who had experiences like that, but he also had like really bad headaches and possibly like partial seizures and clear medical explanations for it. There were members of my ward or people I met in the mission that had claimed such things, but they all seemed to have clearly just biological explanations of how that could be. And then I was like, oh, well, this is a real problem with the history and start of the church. If this is the case, how likely is it that Joseph Smith saw God the Father and Jesus Christ, and that he just forgot to mention it for a really long time? And learning about that and learning more about how Joseph Smith really seemed to believe in mystical and magical elements such as Jupiter talisman that he carried with him. And it was supposedly even in his pocket when he died, this coin that gave him extra powers from the god of Jupiter instead of from Elohim, God Almighty, or even Jesus Christ. And it was just so clear to me that, okay, I really can't belong to this and still study science. I'm just done. And that was really my exit point. Some things that helped when I did leave is, the church trains us in certain things to speak, and if you were a missionary, to dress up and dress clothes and to be kind of pushy and to really start awkward conversations about the church. And as someone that tries to survive leaving Mormonism, suddenly leaving school and being thrown into the workforce, as an ex-Mormon, you might have a higher threshold of embarrassment. That I really certainly felt embarrassed when I first was wearing the missionary name tag and tie and going around in public all the time and everyone's staring at me. It was difficult, and then over time, you just kind of accept it. And so I knew, trying to ask some of my secular friends for help, that, yeah, it's going to be embarrassing, it's going to suck, but it is what it is. Something else that can be difficult for many people is accepting help from others at all. But when you're raised to believe that without God you are nothing and you need to rely on the social structure of the church, it's not a stretch to realize that you really do need help from other people. I see that our time is about up here, so I think we're going to transition here to questions. I know I didn't get too much into post-faith and things, but that is definitely something that I can talk about through the Whova app or at another time. I really love talking about just the mindsets that we use to survive after Mormonism and how we can evolve in our identity and evolve in our purpose after having a faith crisis. So I believe our moderator now has picked out some questions for us, and I'm excited for that.
Yes, hi. Thank you, panelists. We're going to open the floor to questions. If our panelists could show their video and unmute themselves so they could answer. We have 3 questions here that have already been submitted, but if you would like to submit a question, please type it into the Whova app in the questions and answers section. Okay, the first question is, when everything you've built your faith upon begins to crumble, how do you hold up what's remaining?
I'm happy to answer this one. Yeah, I remember at some points when I first transitioned, I would actually have panic attacks. I don't know what's true about anything anymore. It felt like something that had felt so solid was just gone. And so for me, when everything else that you've built your life on seems to be dissolving, for me, meditation was really helpful. It's not for everyone, but for me it was. And one of the ways I would practice that is if I started to have a panic attack or feel like I didn't have something to ground me, I'd say, well, what is one thing I know is true in this moment? So I'd say something like, I know I can feel the floor under my feet. I know I can feel the sensation of the couch or the chair next to me. And, I would sometimes think, well, I don't even know if the floor is actually real or if I can just feel it, but I knew I could feel it. Or I know I feel love for my family. I know I still want to experience a healthy life. So I would just go to what do I know that feels true for me now? It was intense. It's an intense experience to have things you've built your life on dissolving. So no, that's normal.
And it does get better. I think that's important to keep in mind, is like when you're going through it, it's really, really hard, but just hang on to the hope that things in the future will get better.
Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say something that does stick with us is our past experiences and skills that we have developed. And so something that really helped me be like, oh, I love to run. And I felt like when I was a church member, sometimes I didn't have time, or I'd feel guilty for doing this hobby. And a big turning point for me was actually allowing myself and giving myself permission to do some of those things that I felt like I had kind of gone away. So even though I wasn't fast anymore, and even though I couldn't run for as long or as far, just the simple act of doing that really brought me back to things I identified with that had nothing to do with religion. And I found that to be grounding when everything's slipping away and you don't know what you believe or who you are.
All right, thank you. Okay, our next question is one that actually resonates with me pretty good too. How did you handle the negative emotions of rejection so that you could thrive in your faith?
Well, I think it's important to give yourself permission to feel everything. And, you really have to, people will often compare a faith crisis to a death. You really are losing a part of your life. You're losing, it's like a part of you dies. And so you have to allow yourself to grieve the same way that you do when somebody you love dies. And that includes, all of the stages of grief. And you can Google stages of grief. That was very, very helpful to me to understand that all the feelings that I was going through were normal. Allow myself to be angry, allow myself to cry and be sad, allow myself to be in denial, and finally you do get to acceptance. But it's a process, and it's not cut and dry. It's not in a specific order. It's not, you go through it and you're done and then you're fine. It comes and goes in waves, and you can feel fine one day and the next day you're just on the floor sobbing, and that's okay. Just like let yourself feel all the feelings. I think you process it better and you move forward more quickly if you allow yourself that opportunity to truly grieve.
Yeah, I really like that. And I know for me, because that was an intense experience as well, feeling rejected. Oof, yeah, I can really feel that even still, just remembering that. And I think for me, it was a mix of what you said, Laura, even earlier when you were giving your presentation, like finding someone who will love you no matter what. So for me, I had a woman who I was working with and paying her for coaching sessions. But part of the reason I was doing that was because I could feel her love and acceptance no matter what through this whole process for me. And so I think to find someone who's going to not reject you, if that's possible, and to be able to see what it's like to kind of build safety in that relationship amidst the struggle. And then also, for my clients, I work with a 4-step process, and the second step's really focused on owning reality with compassion, including the reality that at times we reject each other. And so for me, it was like a lot about what Laura said too, giving permission. I would say things like, I give myself permission to be rejected. Even though I'm feeling rejected, I deeply and completely honor and love myself. Even though I'm being rejected, I can trust that I can continue to build healthy relationships. Even though I'm feeling rejected doesn't mean I'll always feel rejected. So I worked with a lot of these phrases to kind of open up myself to reality, which is at times we hit bumps where we or others will reject. That's kind of our human nature, and it's not personal. And it's okay that it feels personal. There's grief work to do there. But, those who, quote, rejected me as I continued to heal, they've continued to want to stay close. So it wasn't even a real rejection. But it also feels terrifying as it's happening.
Yeah, I got to the point where I was at my parents' home back in New York after leaving BYU suddenly, and in their mind, I was still a Mormon. I hadn't explained anything about my faith to them or my change of faith. So when I started to date a non-member Mormon in the area, they got pretty concerned, and that actually led to me not even feeling safe in their home, and suddenly, spur of the moment, moving out of their place with nowhere to go. And that is a really difficult feeling of rejection, to have a big family, to have parents that are still together, but then not have anywhere to go and sleep at night. You're going and scrolling through your phone like I used to do as a teenager. Like who wants to be taught by the missionaries? Now I'm scrolling through the phone, looking at a lot of those same contacts, being like, who still lives in this area that would accept a phone call from me despite not hearing from me for so many years or whatever. And then even maybe more concerning than that is a feeling of self-rejection that I went through, at least, of, oh, I used to believe I held this power of the priesthood. I would lay my hands on people and tell them that they will feel better and they'll be healed. And I just felt so much shame and rejection from myself, for like, how did I ever believe in this thing? And how did I really take it so seriously? And really understanding that rejection, and especially rejecting things you used to do or things you used to believe, that is the beginning of growth as well. And so as painful as it is, it's all right to feel it, and it's all right to keep growing. I can't say that there is no risk, or that it doesn't hurt, or that it's not painful, but only that sometimes the only way is through it.
All right. Well, our time is up. There is one more question. Maybe the panelists could go out to the app and answer that one there. And that one is, what has been a constant source of strength for you during times of grief or pain? It'd be interesting to see your answers on the app. Thank you all for attending and for supporting Sunstone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to some more Sunstone.